Welcome to the podcast, Let's Run Fit. I'm your host, Be Lit. This is the podcast that will fuel your fitness journey and empower you to reach your physical and mental health goals. Joining us today is Jenna. She's a passionate mom of 3 little boys. She's a motherhood coach, a dedicated advocate for health and wellness in both moms and children. And Jenna's going to be sharing all of her valuable insights on how to incorporate your kids into your fitness routine and teach them a healthy lifestyle. She's going to talk about how to make it a family activity and just a lifestyle instead of solitary pursuit. So let's dive right in, guys. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Jenna. I'm so excited that you're here. If you could just briefly introduce yourself and your background in health and wellness, and particularly in the context of motherhood, and just kind of let our listeners know who you are.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So I have 3 little boys that I had in 4 years. So you can imagine what kind of toll that took on my body.
Oh, yeah.
And before having kids, before like my whole childhood, I was a dancer. So I was a ballerina. And then into high school, like towards the end, I started incorporating working out and running into my exercise routine, and then fell in love with that. And then the beginning of college, I had to end my dancing career from an injury, but still continued to run and work out because I craved movement. I moved my whole life. I loved how I felt strong and the endorphins and all that. So I was healthy leading up to my first pregnancy, and then I had to dial back in my first and second trimester a little bit when I was pregnant with him for some health reasons. And then, after it, once I kind of got back into my body and healed from a very awful birth, I had a very short time period where I felt like good for a little bit till I got pregnant again. So they were very close in age, back-to-back pregnancies. And actually with my second, I was much healthier. I ran up until 29 weeks with him.
Wow.
Yeah, I felt great. I was all belly and nothing else. It was really nice. He was actually surprisingly my biggest baby, despite all that. So, my birth, I did all natural. So like my healing was just so much better, and I just felt more like myself after him. And still continued to work out and run. And, then, after I had my third, that one was a little bit more challenging because I was pregnant with 2 toddlers.
Oh, yeah.
And that pregnancy was not as enjoyable towards the end when I'm all big and can't do as much. But I still worked out throughout it. And then I had a harder time with my healing again with him afterwards, both mentally and physically. So that was just kind of a learning curve. But despite all that, like I still craved that movement. Like I knew I needed that for my sanity. Even if it wasn't giving me the progress I wanted to aesthetically and physically yet, like I still knew it was good for my mental state. It was I wouldn't say necessarily like escape, but it was like my me time. Made me feel like a person and a human again, despite like being in the throes of having 3 kids, very young. I'm just kind of thrown into that. So, to this day, my youngest is 2 now. So, I still make it a huge priority to work out and run and move my body. And my kids know that, and they're all boys, so they're very active as well. And, I just really I want to continue this not only for my own health, but also like to be a good role model and example for my kids, because I think there's like studies proven that kids of moms who exercise are healthier. Just based off, I guess, the environment they grow up in and what they're around, and it motivates or encourages them to do so, or they do whatever mom does kind of thing. Typically, the kids are usually with mom more than dad. So I just want to instill that in my kids. Like, I'm very passionate about health and wellness and taking care of yourself, both fitness wise and then mentally, and then with your nutrition and everything. And so I do my best with what I got and try to manage all the things and give them the best and healthiest lifestyle with where we're at and what's going on, and balance it all out. So
What's amazing is actually a very recent episode I did. We actually talked about how kids pick up on what their parents do. And if your
Mm-hmm.
parent fed you unhealthy food and sat on the couch and
Yep.
did nothing, then that's what you're going to do with your kids because it's what you knew.
Yep.
So it's just amazing what just having them watch you take the time to do a workout or having them have broccoli at meals and things like that, how it changes their lives without even you actually actively thinking about it, just because
Mm-hmm.
they pick up on what you do. Like it's just,
Yes.
it's so incredibly important. And that kind of like leads into our first topic for today, which is about just how can we teach these kids healthy eating habits. And you have three boys and you have three young
Mm-hmm.
boys, which means you are at the prime age of where they decide to be picky. I know with my
Yep.
sister's kids, one loves eggs, the others hates eggs, and then one will love beans one day and the next day will throw them against the wall saying, nope, I've never liked
Mm-hmm.
these in my life, kind of thing. So how as a parent have you been able to introduce healthy eating habits into your kids, even at their young ages?
Um, well, uh, part of it comes from I was that picky kid. So I see it from two different perspectives. One is the child's perspective, and one now as a mom. And how I felt and how I was raised and how I was introduced to food and like my relationship to food. And there's things I liked and a lot of things I didn't that I'm trying to do differently. Um, and I don't want now I have all boys, and not to say that boys don't struggle with body image, but um, I want to show them that food can make you feel good or not feel good, and to get them to really listen to their bodies because everybody is different. And just because like one of my kids doesn't like salad, but the other one does, so like so what essentially, like it's not a big deal that he'll eat this food but this kid won't eat that food, and then and this one will eat this one but the other two won't. Like I think growing up or even still today I hear it a lot, especially from like my parents' generation and older, because I guess that's how they grew up. Like you ate what was on your plate and that was it. No questions asked. You don't talk about it. You don't fuss about it. Like, and if you didn't, then there's something wrong with you, essentially. Like you're a brat or you're selfish or whatever. You feel entitled that like, ew, I don't want that, or whatever. That just because someone's taste buds are different than yours or someone has different likes and dislikes than you do, then that means it's like wrong. And that really used to get to me as a child. Like that was called picky all the time.
Same.
And as if it was like a bad thing that I didn't like the foods that other people deemed to be likable. Okay, so like I like the color blue, but I could care less if you don't like the color blue. It has nothing to do with me. And so there's tons of foods my kids like that I don't, to this day still. And there are tons of foods that I like that they don't. But I'm not going to force it upon them to make them eat a certain thing. What I try to do, and I would still be picky to this day, considered in some eyes, and some I wouldn't. There's a lot of things I do like now that I used to not as a child, and a lot of it for me personally is like a texture thing.
Same.
And I know a lot of people do deal with that, and that's not anything to like that you've done anything wrong about it. Like I feel like we've just made to think that like you're picky, therefore like you're disobeying in some way, like it's a bad thing, and it's like no, it's just some people just don't like things, and that's what does it do for you that they do or don't like something. It has nothing to do with you. So I just try to make sure I get like a balanced diet. It doesn't matter what that looks like, in terms of people's definitions of like, oh, you're not eating this one vegetable, therefore you're picky, or whatever. So what I try to do is I don't cook multiple meals for us ever. That's way too much work. And I know that if I ever started doing that, that would never stop. When they're
Yeah, it's
really
just
young,
not practical at all.
no, no. Like, because people are like, how do you do it with like three? Like, and we've never eaten, um, we don't eat separately from our kids. Now, my husband will when he works late, like, and he gets home just in time for bedtime, then he'll eat dinner after they go to bed. But like, if we're all home as a family, like, he and I are eating after they go to bed our own meal and we make them a kid meal. Like, that doesn't happen. Um, and when they're really little, yes, there were some instances where if we were out or even at home and like they didn't like what I made, and I expect a younger child to be pickier because their taste buds haven't been developed. I'm not offended that they don't like my cooking. I'm not angry at them for not cooperating. Like they're 18 months or whatever. Like we need to lower our expectations and be more realistic about a child. And pick your battles, like what truly is important. You're not gonna like discipline a child for not liking broccoli. That to me is ridiculous. They did nothing wrong because their taste buds just don't like something, like care more about the moral things that are actually important. But to get off my soapbox a little bit, so there are only a few instances where I like, okay, I'll just give them something simple that I know is like a fallback, but I don't say that. I don't let them know I'm thinking that. I always have that in the back of my mind in case of emergency if we're somewhere and they're served a meal that's like totally foreign to them. I know they're not going to eat it. Um, then yeah, I have things in my back pocket that I'm like, okay, I wait to see if they'll try it. I don't just automatically throw it out there. And like I said, I don't make it known to them. I also never ask my kids what do they want usually. I don't usually give them options. I just make stuff. And then because I feel like the less big of a deal you make something, the less like pushback you're gonna get.
I love
So
that.
when you just like
Right there,
this goes with
banner it.
anything. Yes, this goes with anything. I would tell you like I have had so much success with like I mean like if you take your kid to the doctor and they have to um like if they get a shot or a finger prick or like something painful done or the dentist or whatever and you don't make a big deal out of it and you don't some people like you think you want to like prepare them for this moment because you know what it's like but sometimes less is more like every time I have refrained from saying stuff or reacting a certain way like my mannerisms my tone all that like I say matter of fact and I give them as few details as necessary.
That actually
Some
is
things that I don't say
extremely
at all.
true.
It has gone so well. Like my son had a cavity filled one time, he didn't care one bit. He got to watch TV the whole time. He thought it was fun.
Like
I mean, like
everything you've just said was just so perfect about not, criminalizing the child just because they don't like something. I think
yes.
when you start yelling at them about, oh, you don't like broccoli or you don't like spinach or Brussels sprouts or whatever, you start to make them feel bad about not
Yeah.
liking a healthy food. And then that starts to internalize in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
And that starts to cause other issues down the line because now they're going to start going into well, I'm not a good enough child because I didn't like this one food.
That was me.
And I was the
Yep.
same way. I pretty much grew up
Yep.
on cereal, to be completely honest. My parents eventually just had to give up and just let me eat cereal every meal because growing up, that's
Mm-hmm.
all I would eat. And now I eat foods
Mm-hmm.
that my mom looks at me, she's like, I don't know where you got that from. That was not me.
Same here.
Like,
Yep.
they can't
Yep.
figure out how the change happened. But I
Yep.
love how it's like just meet them where they are, the foods they like, encourage
Yep.
those foods. I
Yeah.
also love how you mentioned you don't make separate meals because it's just so impractical. Like I can
Mm-hmm.
barely function on serving one meal a day, let alone, or not a day
Yeah.
at a time, let alone like
Right.
two. Like it's
It's
not
too much.
practical,
Yeah.
And
And
something
it,
you touched on was about the body image issues.
mm-hmm.
That can come up so easily and it actually happens. And I know a lot of parents, they're like, oh, I didn't cause my child's body, image issues. And like, no, you did not directly like be like, yep, this is what you're going to have. But if you are
Right.
constantly making eat healthy a big deal, eat healthy or this is going to happen to you, you need to eat healthy so this doesn't happen to you. It turns into
Mm.
this internalization where it turns into food as fear. And
Yes.
that's actually what happened to me as a child. Like
Mm.
it wasn't a direct thing. It was make sure you're eating healthy so X, Y, and Z does not happen. Make sure you keep playing sports so X, Y, Z does not happen. And it turned to where the does not happen was this like huge fear in my life.
Oh,
And in
yeah.
my head, it was food was the problem. Food's what
Mm.
I have to control. And it was nothing intentional and nothing that was said directly was something that she'd be like, oh no, that's bad. Why would you ever say it? Sorry, my dog's squeaking her squeaky
No, you're
toy
fine.
now. She stole it back off my desk. But it was never anything direct, but it was just enough that it caused a problem,
Mm-hmm.
And I love that you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned that just make it not a big deal that this is the food we eat and this is our food and that's what matters. And I love
Yeah.
that. Like
Yeah. And
it's perfect.
thank you. And I'll serve them things that I know that's probably not going to happen, but I don't say a word. I just put things on their plate and I see what happens.
Yeah,
And I
you're like,
don't
just
ask them. I
try,
don't
see what
stare at
happens.
them. I don't like, yeah, if they protest and I'm like, if it's something they haven't had before, I just ask them to try one bite. because they can't say you don't like something you've never had. I try to get them to understand that logic. And then if it's something I know they've had that they don't like, okay, like I try to get them to have a little bit, because usually when they say they don't like it, it's a I don't prefer it.
Yeah.
If they
Like how I
flat
don't
out,
prefer Brussels sprouts.
right, but I know they'll still eat a little bit if I ask them to, or if I bribe them a little bit, like then yes, I will. But I don't ever give them things that I know is a flat out no,
I love
because
it.
it's not important. Like they can go without two food items and
Yeah,
be
there
fine.
are items
It's not
every
permanent.
single
It's not gonna be like
adult
this forever.
avoid too. Like
Yeah,
there's not an adult
I
on this
hate
planet that
beans.
eats everything.
Yeah, I will never eat beans. I don't like them to this day. Haven't, but like I'm doing just fine, just not eating that one food group. You know.
Yeah. We're eggplant in our house. Just we can't do eggplant. I don't know what it is. We have tried multiple times
It's
thinking it was
gross.
how
I
we
don't like
cooked
it
it.
either.
We're like, we
No.
just can't. Just it doesn't work. So, but we just have to remember kids are actually little tiny humans. Like they have the same
Yes.
emotions that we do, and their
Yes.
emotions aren't as developed, so they can't put into words
Mm-mm.
why they don't like something. So if you just say, well, tell me why,
Yeah.
probably can't do that. They can just tell you they
Mm-mm.
don't like it and they like this instead. And of course,
Right.
they're going to like candy more. But like you
Right.
mentioned, just put the option of what you want on the table and say nothing. And normally
Mm-hmm.
it'll fall into place.
Yep.
And don't
Yep.
let them know that you have this secret stash of what they'll actually
Exactly.
eat.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
the real key right there.
Yep.
So switching gears into more of like the active lifestyle and working out together, do you incorporate your kids into your workout routine or have something that they do? So like if I'm working out, the kids are like doing schoolwork on a tablet or they're doing like a mini version of the workout with me and things like that.
Yes and no. So I prefer to work out alone. That's like my me time. It goes better. I can focus and whatnot. Now if I'm going to like the gym or going for a run, they're not with me. Um, I tried one time running with my kid when he was younger, and I do not enjoy the jogging stroller. So that's just not. And now I got three, so that's just not safety wise. It's dumb. I'm not going to do that.
It's hard to push those strollers. I pushed one
Yes, it's
walking through a zoo once for my sister, and I was like, nope. How do people
no, I
run with
can't.
this thing?
I can't do. I got a 6'4" and 2-year-old. I can't push them. Like
That's
no,
a lot. And if you could,
that
you'd
is
be a
a lot.
superstar.
Collectively, I think they weigh more than me. So yeah. Um, so when I run or I go to the gym, because our childcare gym is like kind of expensive. I just don't do it. But if I'm working out at home, like when they're younger, it's a lot easier. Like to this day, sometimes if I just have my 2-year-old with me, sometimes I will. And now he's getting to the age where he interrupts me a lot. So I prefer not to do that because it just takes so much longer and I don't want to frustrate him or make myself frustrated and take it out on him. Um, but they know that I do it. They know I'll say mommy's going for a run. Like my mom will watch them or my husband will watch them. Like they know I do it all the time. They've gone to my races and supported me. They think it's so fun. Um, they're my old they're my oldest two are starting to get into sports. My husband's huge into sports, so I hope that like and we're never going to push them to do one sport or the other. The only one I'm making them do right now is swim for their safety, and they know how to swim, and it's great.
That's super important.
Um, yes, and then once we get to some team level, I'm like, if you hate it, you can quit. I don't care about that, but you just need to get the basics down. You need to know a stroke and stuff like that, and how to breathe. But and they do, which is great. But they, as far as activities and sports wise, I want them to be in at least one activity. I don't care what it is, but just so they have something for themselves. Hopefully, at some point, there are some physical activities going on because I think, yes, it's good to move your body. Like, we're not meant to just sit still all day. But I don't want them doing too many at one time either because you can't burn out, especially as a child. Like, be a kid and play and enjoy your life.
Oh, yeah. As they get
But
older, it gets worse because they'll have to pick a sport because it's year round.
Yeah.
Like sports don't end like they used to. Like it used to be a soccer season or a softball
Right.
season. And
Which is
now
what we're trying to do right now. Yeah.
it's
Like
crazy because now they have travel season and school season and
yeah.
off season
And they
workouts.
overlap.
And
Yeah.
it's absolutely crazy
And then
what
we
these
can't keep
kids are
up with that
doing.
schedule. That's a lot. Like we just did our first official baseball for our oldest like T-ball season and there were a few like late night games. I'm like, he's in kindergarten. This is like
Oh yeah,
and like, he
it's
needs to
happening
sleep. He has to
more.
go to school the next day. It's crazy. So like, yeah, we don't think we'll ever be those travel ball parents personally because it's just not our
I don't know
lifestyle.
how they afford it. or how people can do the
Exactly. Oh my goodness.
scheduling.
Time and money. No.
Like it's
Props to
absolutely
those
crazy.
parents. But
Like I have some friends whose kids are in gymnastics. And I'm just like, that is
mm-hmm.
such a time and money
Yes.
commitment.
Yes.
Like,
That was me
what
in ballet. It
secret
was 4
fountain do
days a
you
week.
have? Yeah,
Right.
dance is expensive too.
It
It's
is.
like,
Oh my
where's the
goodness.
money fountain and how do I get one? Like, how are you doing
Right.
this?
Right. I know.
Like, it's so crazy. What are
Yes.
other ways you can encourage them outside of like formal exercise and sports to just be more active throughout the day? I know a lot of kids have started to get attached to screens. It's, very
Mm-hmm.
common topic is that screen time is, ruining today's youth and all of those other
Mm-hmm.
terrifying titles. What are ways you can encourage them to be more active throughout the day?
I don't think I have to encourage my kids. They like it. Um, they're movers. They love to move. Um, so I try to balance it out, especially when it's summertime, like for our sanity, everybody's sanity. We need to get out of the house, but I don't like to be out of the house all day every day because it's also too much. Um, so I try to balance it out because my youngest still is on a nap. During his nap time is when my older two get screen time. So it's kind of like everybody's just kind of like winding down. I can work, they can be on their screens, like we can be a little bit more quiet. And then once he's up, it's kind of free for all again. So um they
So
love to
you
go
limit
outside.
screen time and they just know when their screen time is.
Yes and no. So I don't have like a timer and I have like, oh, they get an hour a day or whatever. But during nap time, they get to play educational games on the iPad while I'm in the room, so I know what they're doing. And they take turns because we only have one. So that is a time limit. I have to make it fair so they each have the same amount of time. But aside from that time, throughout the day, like my youngest does like to watch little YouTube video of Disney songs here and there. So it's usually he gets to pick what goes on TV. And so sometimes they care and they watch it and sometimes they don't. So that's kind of just like on in the background. I try not to have it on all the time, but it does help my singing a little bit when my 2 year old is preoccupied with that for a bit. But I try to
Sometimes
have
that
our day.
happens. Like you need
Yeah.
that. I try to encourage
Yes.
everyone I know who is a parent. I'm like, I am not a parent myself. Like, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert, but
Hmm.
sometimes it is okay to just say, here's a tablet, give me peace for just however amount of time you need peace.
Yes.
Like, that doesn't
Yes.
make you a bad parent if you just
No.
need a moment. Because I feel like
No.
it's been so criminalized that if you
Hmm.
give them a
Hmm.
tablet, that you're a bad parent. Like, no, that means you're a human being.
Exactly.
Sometimes that's what you need. Like my sister uses the tablet time for when she needs her workout time. She does a 15-minute walk or run every day. And that's
Hmm.
when they get their tablet time because she needs them occupied and safe while she's
Yeah.
walking circles
Yep.
around the backyard.
Yep.
Like
Yep.
sometimes it's a good thing. And the kids
Yeah.
think that they're being rewarded when in fact you're just trying to have your peace and quiet for a second.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Like
I'm like everybody wins.
it is. Everyone thinks that they're
Yeah.
outsmarting the rest. Like
Hmm.
is one of
Hmm.
those beautiful processes. When
Yeah.
it
And I
comes
just
to,
make
oh, sorry, go ahead.
I just make sure that my thing is like, yes, the time allotted is important. Like you don't want them on all day, but I try to keep our lives busy enough to where we have time when we're out of the house doing things. We have time in the house when we're not on screens. We have time in the house when we are on screens. So there's like a balance there. I don't want because of the world we live in now and the world they're growing up in as kids, like technology is going to be a part of their life. So I don't want to make it a bad thing, but like anything, you can have too much of a good thing. So
Yeah.
it's all about like, yeah, it's fine to have screens, but eventually, like, we gotta turn them off because it's time to do something else. Like, and when you play, you can't play outside all day long. Eventually, you gotta come inside and get ready for bed. So like, there's an end time for everything, and being able to like shift gears and transition is healthy for them. And those are techniques they need to learn. Like it's time to leave the park when kids are like, no, I don't want to. Like they have to learn those transitions. Like, yeah, it's hard, but that's life because nothing is like continuous.
Yeah.
And then also like monitoring what they watch to me is way more important than how much. So
Oh,
they
yeah.
don't get to be
They can
on
end
it
up in random
alone.
places.
Exactly. They do not get to, I monitor everything they do and they're always in the same room with me when they're doing it.
It keeps them more accountable to make sure for
Hmm.
like you mentioned, like they're getting to do learning games.
Yeah.
Kids are very good at sneaking off things.
Yes,
So,
exactly. They are. And thankfully mine are so young that we haven't had any problems yet, but
oh,
I
it'll
want
come.
to create now. Yeah. So that, especially as boys, like, there's going to be some monitoring and restriction there. So.
Yeah, they're going to end up on some YouTube video of some video game that is way above
Hmm.
their level
Yes, yes.
because that
Yeah,
that
and I'm not just talking
happens.
about like inappropriate stuff when you think about the worst stuff, but I'm also talking about like age appropriate things. Like you're saying, it
Like,
may not be bad, but they don't need to be watching something a 12-year-old would be watching when they're
yeah,
four and
like
six.
they need to wait until they're old enough to comprehend what's happening.
Yes.
And I think that's a
Yes.
huge thing that's happening in the world is kids are being exposed to things before their brain can process it
Yes.
properly, which then
Mhm.
means when that comes up in the real world, their brain was like, oh, okay, even though it's supposed to be something
Mhm.
scary. Like
Yeah,
that should
I
be a
agree.
fear, not a, okay, I watched that when I was 4. Like, no, you shouldn't have
Yes.
watched that when you're 4. Like the kids who watched Deadpool as a
Oh my
kid, if the
gosh.
word kid was
No.
in your name, like, no.
Mhm.
Like that
Mhm.
that was such a big thing. I can remember when that movie came out and like I love that movie, I'm not gonna lie, but it's definitely for adults.
Right. Right. There's ratings for a reason.
Yeah, and a lot of people ignored that and they're like, it's a superhero movie.
Exactly.
No,
Yep.
no.
Yep. Not at
So
all.
going back into like the fitness routine and things like that and keeping your kids active, how is incorporating like your kids into an active routine that you have, how do you feel like that helps strengthen the bond between you and your children? Because like I feel like that would be very important.
Mm. Yes. I think a lot of it has to do with like your kids' loving languages, and I don't think a lot of parents think about that. Like we think about love languages in like our marriage and things like that, but everybody has them, including your kids. So, um, regardless of that, every kid values quality time with their parents. And it doesn't have people think like, I don't have time to like sit and play with them for 2 hours. That's not what that means. Like they need intentional one-on-one, you not distracted, looking at your phone, talking to someone else, doing another activity while you're trying to be with them. They just need that one-on-one attention. It can be like 10 minutes a day. When they say, Mommy, can you play with me? And you say no, or you ignore them, or they keep asking and asking, that's their version of saying, I love you, I want you, I need you to fill my love bucket.
Yeah.
So,
And when you
and
say no,
kids,
sometimes it's fine. But when you say no every
yeah,
time, they're going, okay, well, mommy doesn't care.
exactly. And I read something the other day. It's like, okay, a lot of us will say like, um, let me finish this real quick and then I will kind of thing, or not right now. I'm in the middle of something. And what you value as important, what you're currently doing, they may not value that as important. So they're not seeing it as like, oh, you're washing the dishes. I get that. I'll wait till you're done. Like a child's not comprehend like connecting the dots like we are. So all it speaks to them is like, I'm ignored, kind of.
Mhm.
Mommy doesn't care.
Yeah, I
I'm
think
less
it's so
important than the
important
dishes,
that
you
if you
know?
do say, like, I have to finish this, that you actually follow through on that
Yes, make
because
sure
that is the
exactly.
most
Kids will
important part of the
hold you
bond.
to what you say.
And they
Uh-huh.
remember.
They do. 100% they do.
Oh, my niece
Yes.
can remember exactly who gave her the broken crayon at church like 5 years ago.
Yep.
Like,
Yep.
and the worst part is she's only 6. Like, she still remembers
Yeah.
these things. And I'm like,
My
how does your
4-year-old
brain
remember
have that?
details. Yep, about things that happened years ago. On like the weather that day or something, and you're like, what? Like, yeah, they do. They remember everything. So yes, anytime you make a promise, a guarantee, or even on the other side of things, even if a punishment or a consequence, make sure you're willing to follow through on whatever you're going to say you're going to do
Yeah, because they
beforehand.
remember, and even as they get older, they might forget the details as like they grow up. But
Mm-hmm.
the like, mommy ignored me all the time, even if you weren't actually ignoring them, but
Exactly.
that's how they perceived it. They're going to remember that, and
Yes.
it's going to shape,
Yes.
like you said, their love languages and their love
Mhm.
toolbox growing up, and their relationship attachment styles and everything else. Like it is amazing the psychology because I was a psychology
Yeah.
major and I
Mm.
focused a lot on child psychology about what they did in their childhood
Mm-hmm.
that affects the rest of their life. Like it's absolutely
Mm-hmm.
crazy.
And you figure that out once you become a parent. You're like, oh, that's why I act the way I act.
I figured out a lot of
Oh,
mine when
that's
I
how it's
started going
supposed
to
to
therapy
be.
myself. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
whoa, that's what that
Your eyes
came
are
from.
opened.
And like
Yep.
looking back, I'm like, okay, well, that's what actually happened. But as a child, it's still internalized different.
Yes.
Like it's just
Yes.
it's so crazy how kids really pick up. And that's why it's so important to have these healthy routines and healthy
Mm-hmm.
nutrition and let them watch you work out. Because if
Yeah.
they see mommy's working out, and that's why she's not playing with me right now, but they still know mommy's working out. And then when mommy is done and mommy comes and plays, they go, working out's important. Being healthy is important. and
Yes.
mommy loves me.
Yes.
Like it
Yes.
just
Yes.
internalizes all of these wonderful things. And it's so important to let your kids see that. So I think a
Mm-hmm.
lot of parents hide a lot of that. And like, they're like, oh, I do it before they wake up or I do it after they go to bed. But then they never talk about it. Like doing it before or after is not
Mm-hmm.
a bad thing. Cause sometimes, like you said, you need your me time,
Yeah. Yeah.
but you make sure your kids know that you do it.
That they know. Yeah. Oh, my kids 100% know.
Like
Yes.
they know that if mommy didn't get her workout, mommy's going to be stressed. Like
Yep. Yeah.
they know, and
I
they put
try
those
not to make
dots
it like that.
together.
But yeah. Yeah.
It's crazy the actual life lessons that can come just by them knowing that you work out or that you eat the
Mm-hmm.
broccoli and you eat the Brussels sprouts or, whatever
Mm-hmm.
vegetables you eat a lot and they see that you eat those. Because most of the time they're going to pay attention to that and they're going to eat
Yes.
what you eat. And if they
Yes.
see you say something's yucky, they're just going to assume it's yucky
Mm-hmm.
and they're
Mm-hmm.
not even going to try. Because I have had to power through some of my least favorite foods when I'm around my niece and nephews. Like, I'm just like, oh my
Yep.
gosh, I hate you so much for having kids right now because I'm having to eat this to be a good example. And then the 5 and 6 year olds, like they start eating it and you're like, at least it's worth it. And you're like, oh my God, this was the
Right.
worst meal ever for me. But I know
Right.
that they watched Aunt Brookie eat that. And that was so important.
Yep.
Like,
Yep.
because they talk about it. They're like, well, I ate it because she does and she's fast and I want to be fast. And that's
Mm-hmm.
that's how my niece really kind of puts it together. So I ate
Mm.
that gross meal. I still physically remember this meal. As you can tell, it was traumatizing for me. I think my sister did it on purpose just because she knew I would. It happens. What are some of the most common challenges that you feel like you or any parent faces when they're trying to incorporate health and fitness into their kids' lives?
For their kids or because they're a parent for themselves?
A little bit of both, because I could
Okay.
see issues with time. I can see issues
Yes.
with what the kid's ready for versus what they want to do, because kids don't always
Mm-hmm.
comprehend what is
Mm-hmm.
practical for them.
Yeah. I think, well, with the parent side of things, like obviously time is a huge one. And not to say it's impossible to work out with your kids. Obviously, it's not like you can do anything obviously for free and you don't need all this kind of stuff, but certain things are either not safe or harder to do with kids. So that makes it obviously anything you adding kids in the mix and it automatically ups it. And as far as like how much more of a challenge it is. Um, and then also like for the kids, like getting them to be active. I mean, I feel like most children, unless this is suppressed, and that's where we have the issue, by design and how they're created, because they're children, like to play. And a form of play is being physically active.
Yeah.
So they either have this sitting form of play where they're like playing with dolls or animals or action figures or Legos or whatever, like the more thinking kind of or imaginative play. And then they have like they've got energy to burn off for a reason and they have to use it. So I feel like the kids that don't, I'm generalizing here, obviously, I'm not trying to make it like sound like all kids like this are doing this, but a lot of the kids that don't or aren't as active are usually that like natural ability and desire to move is suppressed because of, I guess, the parents' situation or their inability to handle their child's energy level, or their time or just whatever they've got going on. So they shove a screen in their face to like get them to calm down, or they think it's more stressful for them as the parent to take them to the park or to take them to go play with their friends or to have them go play outside. So they just give them other activities instead. So it's not like it's not encouraged, but it's not like almost allowed in a sense.
Yeah.
And so the
Bodies
kid
in
is like,
motion stay in motion. And when you
yes,
force the
exactly.
kid and say, sit down, be quiet, eventually they sit down and be
Yes.
quiet and they don't get back up
Mm-hmm.
because their brain takes it as, oh, activity bad. Let's not do
Bad.
that to make mom happy. And that wasn't even an
Right.
intentional thing the parent did.
Right. No.
Like, and that's
It,
one of those things about parenting that's so difficult is
yeah.
there's so many things that you can do by
Mm-hmm.
accident.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. A lot of this is not intentional. It's not like parents are like, you're not supposed to be active your whole life, and that's bad. But it's also like, I understand as a parent, like how overstimulating it can be sometimes, and how stressful it can be if you don't have your own emotions and mental health and physical energy in check and taken care of. then yeah, of course you can't handle that. And a lot of times that's why you see a lot of adults like freaking out when kids are running around, or you would think being crazy. No, they're just being kids.
Yeah,
But
like you always have to
because,
remember they want to move until you convince them
yes,
not to.
exactly. But
It's,
allowing them to do in the safe environments that are created for that, yes, that's what we should encourage.
oh,
You know,
it's
not to
so important.
discourage the movement, but just where is the movement taking place?
If you could give just one piece of advice for a new parent who's, kids finally starting to grow up into the years where they're starting to move, like they're just starting to move around, what advice would you give them to kind of help teach that parent the best way to kind of get your kid active in the proper way and all of that kind of movement? You know, I'm trying to say, like, get the
Mm-hmm.
kid moving without telling them to stop, but while also keeping your sanity as a parent.
Um, Activities are good, like whether it's an actual sport or like little classes, depending on the age, like they have like little, I know there's little gyms everywhere, like little gymnastic classes, or great for kids to be moving, um, playgrounds, the park, indoor and outdoor, like any place for them to where they view it as fun, they view it as play, but it's also physical activity that they need. Um, Obviously encouraging those things, because the more something seems fun to a child, the more likely they're going to do it. So it's all about like how you paint the picture for them. Like how do you make something seem, like I said before, with the things that are not so great, when you don't, not dumb them down, but when you don't talk about them as much and you don't make a big deal out of them, then they're not as bad usually. Even though it's the same thing, it just all depends on how you approach it. So how you approach activity should never be like viewed as a requirement, because then they're not going to look at it as fun. Um, should never be viewed as a form of punishment, or like positive or negative to, I'm going to make you move, or I'm going to tell you to stop moving. But also, like I said, just making sure like finding the safe places to do so in the proper areas. And also, some kids love to be social, so making it a fun thing for friends, get them to have them get them having friends and doing things with their friends, because then they won't think about the actual activity. They'll think about, oh, I get to spend time with this person and that's fun, so therefore I want to do it.
I love that. That's just perfect advice of make it fun, make it active, and just make it
Mm-hmm.
part of their life. Like it's perfect.
Oh, thank you.
Well, I want to thank you so much, Jenna, for being here today. Like you shared so many
Mm-hmm.
good insights of just small things that don't even take a lot of time or thought from the parent, but that can make such a
Mm-hmm.
huge difference in a child in growing them and building just a true foundation of wellness and just family focused health and fitness and just keeping it where everybody is together. So thank you so, so much. And I appreciate you more than you know for coming on and talking with us today.
Yes, thank you for having me.
We love it. Thank you. Thanks so much, runners, for spending time with me and listening to this episode. If you like what you heard, please hit that subscribe button and leave me a review. I always love to hear from my listeners. And if you want more Let's Run Fit in your life, find me on Instagram at Let's Run Fit with Be Lit. Until next time, runners. The information in this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for medical or professional advice. Please always consult a medical professional if you're seeking medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The Let's Run Fit podcast is not liable for risk or issues associated with using or acting upon the information in this podcast.